So we're just going to sort of migrate into theme 3 now, which is when designing practices and determining outcomes, what considerations do we have to support or stretch the goalkeeper? So, Tux, this is the first question for you, which is around how do you suggest best incorporating a goalkeeper's sort of information that you would impart onto them into an out of possession squad session, so that you're not just the goalkeeping coach that takes them in the corner and then they go over. How can you best be involved in that process?
So really, as a coach, I suppose is that information obviously in relation to what they're going to experience in that particular aspect of the session, I would say. So if they're going into, for instance, the example that Sam shows on the previous on the YouTube with the England under 21s playing, having them having an understanding in what's actually going to be happening in that session is vitally important. So they know they're going to be defending, they're going to be out of possession as a team, but then go in transition into possession. But if we focus on the out of possession aspects, it's important that they understand what the tactical aspects are needed within that game. So Sam just said just then about an opposite fullback tucking in, for instance. So that sort of communication aspect will be important in there, and that is the information that needs to be given. How does that look, you might say? So for instance, if I was to say, right, you need to be a little bit further forward and be on the front foot. Well, what does that mean? From a technical and tactical aspect. So from a tactical aspect, you'd say, right, be further forward or be more advanced. But from a technical aspect, how does that look? So as I just said, be on your front foot. One foot in front of another. Get your weight forward. So if that ball gets played through, boom, you're off. You're on your starting blocks, ready to advance into that sort of section of the pitch where you need to defend the ball that's coming through. We mentioned about praising actions. And then, when the goalkeeper deals with them things, if he comes out and he clears the ball or he's able to come out and smother a ball, etc. So you're going from that out of possession to in possession action. It is important that, you use the information to praise them, to tell them what they've done well and how they've done well and really why they've done well. So we always talk about the what, the why, the where, the when and how and so on. And it's not good just using that on the coaching sessions, within our coach education environment. We can also use them sort of aspects on the training field, so telling them how he can do it and why he can do it and where he's done that is vitally important also in selling that information.
Nice. And I suppose choosing the right time is quite key. You don't want to be going in there every single rep that the outfield have. It's almost like allowing them to make the mistakes or really triumph in the moment.
Of course, you need to see them play before you can actually coach. Because if you keep telling them to do this, you're never going to actually know whether they can actually do it themselves. So that's why sometimes you need to take a break out of it. I remember the analogies. I remember many years ago, someone I think it was actually Steve McLaren. I was watching an under 21s game or something like that, under 23 when he was manager at Derby, and it was actually a short corner was going to be played. And he was the first team manager at the time, and he shouted on, don't tell him to do this, don't tell him not to go short of it. And he said, well, why he needs to? Yeah, but if you keep telling him, we're not going to have an understanding whether he can actually do that or not. You know what I mean? So you need to get an understanding of what the goalkeeper in this stage can actually do and what he can't do, and then that forms the next basis of your development plan for him when you're actually working with them.
Yeah, certainly a fine
training session.
There's certainly a fine balance of being that teacher role there and letting them really just be, and being also free to explore. When they're faced with 65,000 people or whether it's 300 people, that they're on their own at times. So yeah, really interesting point. And I suppose it links to you, Miki. Now, when the goalkeepers are across with the team, are there any out of possession links within team practices?
Yeah, there's loads. I think we spoke all about out of possession tonight, but obviously most of the time that you may get your goalkeepers involved early on, especially in practice, maybe in possession sessions. And I would just like to just sort of throw some sort of thoughts out in terms of like, are we considering what happens on turnovers and transition in possession practices, or do we just have the goalkeepers on the end to bounce it back in and play balls in? Like, what happens in the game if they give the ball away? There's going to be a consequence. So the consequence can be maybe a goal. So how I would look at that in an in-possession practice would possibly be, you may have some, the mini passing goals, and you may have those at the end of the sort of area that the goalkeeper's supporting and building from. And if he gives the ball away, he has to, try and block off one of those mini passing goals, and that will be that out of possession transitional moment that he needs to recover back in to defend his goal. Another way you could do it would be if you wanted a squad practice where the goalkeepers are going to be live, you may have them sort of, in the possession box in the middle, goalkeeper on either end. But when they play through a certain zone, they're now going to attack the goal. So it looks like a game. So it's a two-way flow game. So the goalkeeper knows he's high to support and build. But as soon as the ball gets played into a certain area, that's the sort of trigger for them to recover and drop to defend the goal, or potentially still be dropping with intent to defend the space. There's a couple of ways of doing it. And I just think that even when we are doing in possession practices, if we can have those sort of transitional elements and sort of link it back to the game as much as possible, and train exactly like the game, train the scenarios exactly like the game, it'll benefit them and help them further on. May look really messy at the start, they may be all over the place, they may not get things right, but that's fine. We need to be comfortable with that, because when we see them struggling within these things, it's not a bad thing. It's a learning experience for them, and the more and more they get sort of, I spoke about safe uncertainty, that will be safe uncertainty. They're getting all the learning out in training. So actually when it comes to a game, they're not learning it for the first time in that high pressure environment where you just mentioned they're on their own, and they are on their own in the game. So they're not just learning it for the first time there. We've sort of done it within our sessions.
I think the key word that you pulled away from there, Miki, is like transitions. Often, I'm definitely guilty of it, is imparting like singular elements within a session. So the goalkeeper then becomes really framed at doing the same moment over and over and over again, versus working out how does that moment look when something else happens. When a realistic opportunity happens like that transition. I'm not always going to be in that perfect position for the shot. I might have had to transition from a slightly different position to get there. So I think the key element, or the key word that you just said there is really transition. And I think if we can all focus on that as coaches, I think the goalkeepers will hopefully be better for it. So Tux, like we've spoken about transitions there, but we're not all blessed with half a pitch or a full pitch, at times. And I've definitely experienced it at previous clubs. I know you have, Miki, as well. When we've got smaller areas, how in smaller practice areas can you develop the sweeper keeper? And how would you look to embed this within your training session with really such limited space? You might only get quarter of a pitch.
Yeah, it is a challenge in itself, and that can be chucked on you last minute that a facility is not available, or a pitch isn't available, or the outfield coaches want a little bit more space than what you'd planned for, etc. So the environment is always changing in our coaching environment, as everybody online here will probably allude to. I thought from the presentation, from YouTube, it was a great point in affecting that size of the area. So from the goalkeeping aspect, the pitch doesn't always have to be symmetrical in a way where both goal areas have to be the same size. So if you're working on the aspect of dealing with the space in front of you, etc., you could have a possibility that one of them areas might be 20 yards in depth that the goalkeeper has to defend, where at the opposite end it might only be 5 yards. And then the goalkeepers will change or rotate after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. So, you might be a goalkeeper that's only got a 5-yard area to defend, which might be more so about defending the goal. Whereas at the opposite end, his area might be 15, 20 yards, 25 yards, whatever that might be. So he'll have a few other things to think about. He might have to defend the area, defend the goal, defend the space. So, you might have 2 or 3 things to think about. So, that's a challenge, and, you have to be open-minded to how you can actually change and focus on your the environment that you've got. So, again, there's no right and wrong answer, but, speaking, as we've touched on things in communicational aspects, not just with the goalkeeper, but also with your coaches and outfield coaches, in what you need from the sessions, etc. as well. So, it's important that you do have that communication aspect where, you can work together and utilize the space and the environment that you've got to your hand, in your hand. And as I said, that might be a school gym, and it might be in a full-size football pitch. So that might change week to week. So you have to be flexible and thinking on the spot a little bit sometimes. You can make your practice be effective to the needs. In this case, defending that space.
So if I pick on two words there, Tux, which is effective and almost adaptable, it links to a question here for you, Miki. Is like, if you look at starting positions within a training session, you might have the smaller pitch, you might have the larger pitch, you might be working on defend the goal. It could be defend the space, it could be defend the area. But, what methods have you found to best coach it? Is it show them? Is it allow them to do it themselves? What does that, is it tell them? What does it look like to you?
Yeah, there's multiple ways of doing this. We're speaking a lot about on the pitch, and I'll touch on off the pitch stuff as well that we can do to help our players. But in terms of on the pitch, the question you just said there, Ant, about like, do we tell them, do we show them, or do we do trial and error? I definitely think trial and error comes first. Let them have a go at it, and that helps us as a coach then understand where we may need to support and help them. Because if we just tell them everything right from the start before they have a go at it, we don't know which part they might need, sort of certain support on and certain help on. So trial and error would be my sort of let them have a go at it first, and let's just observe and manage it. But the best thing for me then would be like, as soon as we see it go wrong, let's just see how they react. When that scenario comes again, if it goes wrong again, as a coach, we've observed and we're going, right, okay, there's a certain aspect of this that they're not quite grasping. And there's 2 ways you can go about this now. So you can either jump in and tell them. So in terms of it, if we just speak about positioning as an example, their positioning may be too deep for a ball over the top, and they keep getting indecisive whether to come or stay. So we've seen that happen, and we see it happen 2 or 3 times. If we now go in and tell them to be higher, the problem with that we're possibly going to have is, yes, we'll get them in the right position, but the outcome still might be the same where they're indecisive because they don't know why they're stood higher. So if you tell me, I'll do it. But if you show me and involve me, I'll understand it. So that's sort of what I would say. So in terms of maybe some guiding questions, okay, so how can you might say to them, how can you improve that ball over the top? How might you get there a little bit quicker? They might go, maybe by being a bit higher. Go on then, give it a go. Try going a bit higher. Now we're sort of guiding them to the answer, and we might have to be patient with this as well, guiding them to the answer. So that would be my on the pitch process, really, in anything. That's just a simple ball over the top with positioning. But I would use that. If they just can't get it, and you've guided them and involved them with it, yes, there may be an opportunity now where we need to show them. And we need to show them, but it's important that while we're showing them, we're still giving them the why, because that'll be the key for them to gain their understanding from that. So that's on the pitch, and I think there's a definite off the pitch stuff we can do. So can we set them tasks while they're watching football? The most important thing we've got right now is the Euros. We've got game after game after game after game going off. And, how many people are actually using this as an opportunity to go, okay, have a look at Manuel Neuer's position tonight with your young goalkeeper. And I want you to feed back to me on what you saw. So it might be, what happened to David Marshall. I'm not just saying this because he's Scottish and we're English, but what happened to David Marshall has happened because, I've not mentioned the Welsh, mate. The Welsh are doing well. But in that high sort of start position, and then he's got caught out by it. So then you're starting to form a conversation. Okay, why was Marshall in that position? What position would he have been better being in? And you're starting to coach off the pitch now as well. It's not just everything you're doing on the pitch. And the other one might be like, not just a negative. You might be looking at somebody like a Donnarumma who's had a good tournament so far, and you might be going, wow, look at what he's doing, and why is he so successful in what he does? let's not forget our own goalkeeper, Jordan Pickford. We've got 3 clean sheets in 3 group games here. He's obviously doing something right, and the team are doing something right. So are we looking at Jordan? Are we looking at the effective actions we spoke about out of possession? Are we looking at the big saves he made, like the one against Scotland? And are we also looking at, like, I know you can't hear him, but you can visibly see his communication, his relationship between his back four is to a high level, which is why we've been so resolute in not conceding so far in the tournament. So there's definite ways of doing it off the pitch as well. And I think that quite a lot of people are speaking about session design and how to incorporate this into session design. And I think if people keep their eyes open and eyes peeled for the next couple of weeks, and you've got a really good webinar coming up, which is the importance of decision making in session design. And I think a lot of questions people have got now are really beneficial if they can log on to that later on.
Yeah, fingers crossed that will prove to be good. So I suppose it's just like 2 quick fire questions to finish, Miki and Tux. The first one links to your point there, Miki, of like, you know, Jordan's obviously doing something really well, but he's got a high level of development within the team. You know, he's obviously really connected to the team. And my question to you, Tux, and it's quite quick fire here, in the sense of, if a club is lucky enough to have a goalkeeping coach, how do you best use them?
In what way, man?
You know, if there's an opportunity to get them involved in a session design, if there's an opportunity to get them in on the pitch, you know, what has been your most influence in terms of being a goalkeeping coach that's been part of the technical staff with the outfield group?
The biggest challenge, and I mentioned it earlier, is actually, you know, liaising with the outfield coaches, and the outfield coaches having the respect for you as a goalkeeper coach, or not just as a goalkeeper coach, or seen as a goalkeeper coach. You know, again, I relate to UEFA. I've been involved with the UEFA setup for a number of years now, and for those of you that know Franz Hoyk, who's a big advocate in the UEFA goalkeeping and coach head there, he never classed himself when he's worked at all the top clubs, you know, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, the national teams in Poland, in the Netherlands, and so on. He never once classed himself as a goalkeeper coach. He was always classed himself as an assistant coach. And that's what he is. That's what we are as goalkeeper coaches. We're assistant coaches. Okay. And it's vitally important, I believe, when any form of session is going on, that we are there or thereabouts with the head coach, the assistant coach, the first team coach, whoever it might be, discussing these sessions with them. Because otherwise you're just working in isolation, you know, on what you're doing. You might be working on a totally different topic to what, you know, you might be going into later on. So if you have something to work on, and if you're talking about out of possession as we are there, we need to make sure we take this further forward from not just working with your goalkeeper or 1 or 2 players, but when you take that into the environment we're working with the squad, you know, when they all come together, the 16, 20 players, whatever it might be, you know, there's a correlation to what you've been doing for the last, you know, 45 minutes in you know, on your own, to working with that squad environment. But to do that, you need to have communication with your coaches, and you need to work closely with your coaches. So, you know, if there's something that anybody can try to do after coming off this webinar tonight, you know, is probably ask yourself the question, do you have that dialogue with your outfield coaches? Do you have your dialogue with the outfield coaches around your coaching sessions and what you do and what they do? And if not, you know, the challenge I would say for you over the forthcoming weeks and months is try to improve it. Try to improve it and show them what you can do and how you do things. And what you might do, you might surprise yourself, and more importantly, you might surprise your head coach and your assistant coach in what knowledge you have. And, you know, ultimately, that hopefully will not just improve your goalkeeper, but also improve your team as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely an acceleration of learning there for team, goalkeeper, and obviously personal growth as well, hopefully. Definitely. So Sam, really just to round it off, you know, how important is it to concentrate on what we hear all the time of these fundamentals or basics versus, you know, just letting the goalkeepers find their own style and unique way of being a goalkeeper?
Yeah, obviously, when you come to the football pitch first time as a young goalkeeper and you don't know anything, you know, if you start coaching them and ramming stuff down the throat and stuff like that, like, they may fall out of love with the game as early as 8 years old. You know, they come to play football because they love football and they enjoy football. and they love goalkeeping and enjoy goalkeeping because they like probably throwing themselves around the goal and making loads of saves and stuff like that. So it's important that we have a balance of being free to allow the goalkeepers to be who they are going to be, and within that, our guiding questions and all the stuff we spoke about tonight will help sort of us coach them. You know, they need us, but we need them. So it's not like, you know, we just give them a Bible and swallow that and listen to that. It's having the environment, and how good does it feel if you cast your mind back, and everybody on this, if you cast your mind back to when you did something as a goalkeeper and you made that save, or you came for that cross, nobody really taught you it. You just did it and it felt good, or something clicked for you and you was allowed to do that. So the key for me would be having a really good balance, and not being too high on one or the other. So yeah, thanks for that, Ant. Listen, it's been great. It's been great discussion. Thanks for everybody for listening. And we can't hear you. We can see you typing away, but hopefully you've not all fallen asleep and it's been beneficial for you. Hopefully we've answered any questions that you may have had while we've been talking, and you know, if there's been any questions in terms of stuff that's come up, hopefully we've answered them in the chat box. I'd just like to personally thank Ant for facilitating this and probing some really good questions on top of what you've already put in, and Tux for contributing and providing some excellent discussion and detail. So thanks both for that. The main takeaways, I think, for all of us from today will be, number one, we'll be understanding our profile of the goalkeepers in line with the considerations for the team. Number two would be understanding the effective actions for our goalkeepers to produce and how they can proactively manage out of possession through positioning and instruction. And third, we spoke about it quite a lot, and probably the most key one for us all here would be knowing how to stretch and support the goalkeepers through our process. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for your time, and enjoy the rest of the Euros.